Hey, everybody. So nice to see everybody on Zoom. Hope soon that we'll all be together in the center where I am virtually today. The building is open and available, so we hope that everybody could join and we see you there soon. Also, a quick public service announcement about our Instagram page. The Sephardic Community Center is looking for approximately 450 more people to follow us on Instagram so we could reach the 10,000 person milestone. We'd encourage anyone who doesn't follow but is on Instagram to please log on, follow the center, follow our programming, see what we offer. We offer so much to the community, like events like today and so much more. So we'd appreciate you following and participating. Okay, before we begin, just a quick introduction and thank you to a few people. Firstly, today's event is being chaired by both Irene Hannon and Ricky Novick. Thank you, Irene and Ricky, for everything that you've done. This is probably the 10th event that you've put together just since the pandemic, and you've done so much more before that. And we all look forward to seeing what you'll put together for us in the community going forward. So thank you again. Today's conversation will be moderated by Rabbi Joey Soffer. Joey, mabruk on your recent simicha. In addition to Rabbi Joey's day job as a securities and derivative trader, the rabbi spends a considerable amount of time teaching members of our community with his daily daf yomi, and of course he volunteers his time both on the SCA and the SBH boards. Rabbi Joey, thank you so much for taking the time this morning. I'd also like to thank a man who needs no introduction, a true community role model and leader, Mr. Ronnie Towell, who was instrumental in bringing his cousin Abraham to our community today for this special program. Ronnie, thank you for everything, and I will send it over to you for some brief remarks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Stephen, for your kind introduction. I really appreciate it. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us today. You might be wondering why I'm part of today's exciting program. A bit of background is warranted. As it turns out, I am related to Eli Cohen and, of course, to today's honored guest, Abraham Cohen. My father was Ralph C. Towell. His father, my grandfather, who I never had the privilege of meeting, was Moshe Cohen Tawil. My grandfather's first wife, Sarah, passed away at a relatively young age after having 6 children. My grandfather remarried. His second wife was Latifa, with whom he had 6 children. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Ronnie.
Okay. Baruch Hashem, my grandfather had 12 children. Amazing. As such, I had 5 full aunts and full uncles, and 6 half uncles and half aunts, and needless to say, many cousins and half cousins. My father passed away in 1949, leaving behind 6 children, of which I am the youngest. Prior to his passing in 1949, my father was the only one of all his siblings to emigrate to the United States. As such, I never got to know any of my aunts, uncles, half uncles, and half aunts until some of them migrated to the United States in the early and late 1950s. Fast forward to 1998 and 1999. My half cousin, Henry Towell, called to tell me that my full cousin, Maurice Cohen, the brother of the famous fighter Eli Cohen, was visiting from Israel and would be giving a lecture at a Jewish center in Long Island within the next few days. I asked him, what do you mean, full cousin? I'd always known that we were related to Eli Cohen, but surely not as close as full first cousin. Henry assured me that it was true. To my surprise, he explained that Eli Cohen's mother, Sophie, was one of my father's full sisters. As such, Eli and I were, in fact, full first cousins. So my brothers David, aka Hurdle, Bobby, and I went to the lecture along with my cousin Henry. After the lecture, all of us had a warm and enjoyable conversation. Maurice told us that his son was to be married the next night at a shul in Eastern Parkway and asked if we might be able to attend. We attended the wedding, and the conversation after the ceremony, Maurice brought out a photo of my parents. The photo was from the early 1930s. Incredulously, we asked why he happened to have the photo with him during such a brief visit to New York. He told us that he always traveled with his photo because of his fond memories of my parents who had been sending money overseas to their family that had sustained them for many years. We were literally overwhelmed. At any rate, sometime in the year 2000, Maurice reached out to let me know that he was making a return trip to New York. His mission was to enlist the US government's help to recover the remains of his late and dear brother who was buried in an unknown location somewhere in Syria. I was able to make a number of inquiries, but it all came to a crushing halt due to the beginning of the Intifada, when all diplomatic ties between Syria and the US government were cut off. Despite our lack of success, we kept in touch, including a number of Maurice's subsequent visits to New York. In 2005, Maurice gave me a treasured memento. It was a photo. Can you see it? It's a photo of the Moment magazine. And in there, he had written an article, a long article about his history. And he gave me a beautiful inscription, which I'll read. Given with affection to my dear cousin, Ron Towell, Maurice Cohen, something I treasure. A number of years later, Maurice passed away. To my good fortune, I was left with a number of very fond memories. 10 years later.
Hi.
Yona, I need you back here.
Can I take one for a friend also?
10 years later, 10 years later, in August 2015, I saw an ad in the Image magazine. Could you see the ad? The ad was The Impossible Spy, given by the Chabad of the Shore, undercover in Damascus, an exclusive evening with Abraham Cohen. Thursday, July 16th, 2015. And of course, my brother and Hurdle and I went to the event, and we had a chance to meet Abraham for the first time. And here's a photo of me and Abraham. Shortly thereafter, I received an email from Abraham on August 1st, and I'm going to read it to you. It's very personal. My dear cousin Ronald, great excitement and a lot of emotion gripped me when I met you and your brother at the event in memory of Eli Cohen in Long Branch, New Jersey. Since my childhood, the image of my uncle Raphael and his wife Pauline is firmly planted in my memory. A picture of a handsome, noble couple, which my mother spoke proudly about them. Also, the impressive picture of my cousins sent from the United States in the 20s to my mother Sophia in Alexandria. I always wanted to meet these beautiful people, and here the dream came true, this exciting meeting. I would be very pleased to hear the story of your family to complete the puzzle. I am pleased to send you pictures of your parents and your picture with your siblings taken in your childhood. Best wishes, yours, Albert Abraham Cohen. And attached was a photo of my parents, a photo of my family before I was born, and a photo of our mutual grandfather. Since then, my cousin Abraham and I have kept in touch from time to time. In the chance conversation that I had with Ricky Novick about a year and a half ago, I related some of the details of my encounters with Maurice and Abraham. A few months later, Ricky reached out to see if we might be able to invite Abraham for an in-person visit and lecture at the center. We had planned it for this past May, but due to COVID, we were compelled to cancel. So here we are doing a Zoom version where I'm proud and excited to greet my dear cousin Abraham. Abraham, how are you doing? Regards to Dahlia, your wonderful wife, and turn it over now to Joey Soffer, who will take it from here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen and Ronnie, for those opening remarks. We're very excited to have this morning's event. We've already have, it looks like already a tremendous turnout. There's over almost 350 people already attending. And I'm sure as we get along, it's going to be more. So Abraham, I hope you're at the top of your game. We have a big crowd for you. And I'm going to ask Abraham to begin by giving us just a little bit of a background about himself, what he's been up to. And then we're going to have hopefully a very interesting conversation for everybody. Abraham, please. Bechavod.
First of all, I want to thank Ronnie for his warm words. And we met really in, I think, in New Jersey. I gave a lecture then a few years ago. So I am an economist. I served in the army at the communication, and then after I finished my service, I worked as an economist in the Industrial Development Bank of Israel. And then for 2 years, I was next to a unit in research intelligence in Tel Aviv. And then I returned back to my job in the Industrial Development Bank of Israel as an economist. I was born in 1945 in November, and now I'm about 75 years old. So I'm trying always to keep the memory of Eli Cohen all over the world. I gave lectures in a few months ago in Germany. I was invited by Kerna Yesod in Munich, and Chabad usually invite me to give lectures in various Chabad houses in the United States. So I suggest that we'll begin with
let's begin. I just want to say that it's very interesting that it looks like, you know, you're actually part of our community and you've been speaking all over the world, and yet first time this is actually coming back to, you know, to us. So we're very excited to hear about this, Abraham. So please, Bechavot, take it away.
Thank you. Eli was born in 1924, December 6th. And my parents came to Alexandria or to Egypt when they were children in 1910, I believe. And they came to Cairo first, and they moved later to Alexandria. They didn't know each other. They are from different families, but the two families are from Cohen's source. You know, my father was from Gindi Cohen Gindi, and my mother, as you know, was from Tawil Cohen. Two Cohen's families. And they met in Alexandria, and my uncle Ralph, or Raful, before he knew that she's going to be married, he sent her an affidavit to come to the United States, but she decided to be married is better than going to the United States. So all the family, all my siblings, born in Alexandria. This is my father and my mother in Alexandria. This is me when I was about 3 years old. The picture was taken by Eli, and you see he colorized the picture. Even at that time, there was no cellular phones with cameras on and colors, and even there was no colored film, but he knew how to colorize the photo after, even if it was black and white before. In this age, I left Egypt with my parents and all my siblings. I was 3 years old when I came to Israel with my parents and my siblings in 1949. But my brother Eli came to Israel 10 years after us. You see, that's the area where we lived in Alexandria. It looks like Paris, I think. It doesn't look like like an Arab country.
It doesn't look like that anymore, Abraham. It doesn't look like that anymore. I was there.
I know.
It used to look like that.
At that time, only European go on that stores and and only they came only to clean there. This is the main synagogue it's called Eliyahu Hanavi in Alexandria. It's a very old synagogue there. It's but it was ruined by Napoleon when he conquered Egypt, and it's rebuilt in Italian design. You see Eli Bar Mitzvah in November 1937. the Zionist organization were allowed to exist until the declaration of the State of Israel in 1948. And you see here the flag of Israel raised freely in Abu Qir near Alexandria in 1947. Eli was very, from a young age, engaged in the Zionist movement, according to the influence of his rabbi, the chief rabbi of Alexandria, who was a Zionist. In the contrary to the chief rabbi of Egypt, he was anti-Zionist at that time. You see Eli here with his friends, Professor here, Schlossberg, an Ashkenazic, lived. There was about 15,000 Ashkenazic people in Egypt at that time. And the whole population of the Jews in Egypt was about 65 or 70,000 Jews. Among them was 15,000 Ashkenazic who came from Israel. They expelled by the Ottoman Turkish at that time, and they came to Alexandria, and they prayed together in the same synagogue in Eliyahu Navi in Alexandria. This is the son of the chief rabbi of Alexandria. The chief rabbi wanted Eli to be a rabbi. He said to my parents that he was a Ilui in Hebrew. It's like a genius, you know. And he wanted him to send him to the Isle of Rhodes. At that time, the Isle of Rhodes belongs to Italy, not to Greece as now. But the World War II arose at that time, and the seminary of the rabbinical seminary of the Sephardic, which was at that time in Rhodes, closed, and Eli went to learn electrical engineering in Alexandria University. He won the baccalaureate. They made a concourse for all the people in. He won the first place and he was accepted to the university immediately.
So from an early age, you could tell that he was very, very smart, apparently, right? He was above average in many, many things. I guess
Yes.
that was one of the reasons that he was recruited.
Perhaps, yes. But he was recruited before in Egypt, not. But
So even as a young boy, you say when he was involved in the Halutz, this is already the Israeli influence was already in seeking out Jews to help the Israeli government. There wasn't a government yet.
Yeah, no, there was a youth movement, but later he also joined the intelligence there before the erection of
The state. They were already seeking out intelligence agents from before the government was formed.
But the good life in Alexandria or in Egypt came to an end after the declaration of the Statehood of Israel in 1948. Any suspected Zionist was placed in the detention camps and so on. So even the chief rabbi of Alexandria, because he was a Zionist, he was expelled from Egypt at that time.
And some of my family members are the same. As we share a background, Eli. My parents were also from Cairo, Alexandria. They lived in. My uncle was actually also thrown out from Egypt at this time in the family. Some in 1949, had to move to America by himself. And then my rest of my family came in the 50s and 59. So this is very familiar background. It's really amazing how close our relations are, just with the whole Syrian community, Egyptian community in Brooklyn. And then this is really, the people look up so much to Eli. I mean, the whole world looks up to Eli, but to know that the connection is so close, I think is really shocking. I don't think people know this.
You know, following the bad situation in Egypt, my parents decided to send 3 of my siblings to immigrate to Israel in the beginning of 1949. You see, this is Maurice here in the left side of the presentation.
Yeah, Eli, Abraham, you're on mute. Abraham, you muted yourself by mistake. The last thing we heard from you was that this is Maurice on the left side of the screen. So turn on, Emily, if you could unmute Abraham, maybe.
Yeah, I sent him an unmute. He has to click unmute. Yeah. there you
Okay.
go.
Yeah, so Abraham, the last thing we heard from you was this is Maurice on the left side.
Yes, of course. And then this is Odette. She was elder than Eli. And the third one was Ezra, without the head. He joined immediately when he came to Israel to the army, and he fight in the
War of Independence.
War of the Independence, yes, on the last battles of the War of Independence. He passed away a few months ago, half a year ago. And the rest of the family immigrated to Israel immediately after them at the end of 1949. And Eli said to my parents that he wanted to finish his study in the university. And after he finished the study of the year of 1949, he will join the family. But it was only an excuse to remain in Egypt. This is me here on the left side, on the right side of the picture. This
And
is
your parents didn't have a problem to leave him there. They was okay. We're gonna move and we're gonna leave our son in a different country. I think parents nowadays wouldn't be so comfortable with something like that.
Yes.
How old was Eli when they left?
When they left Egypt?
Yeah, when they left Egypt and they left him there alone, how old was he?
He was, I think it was about 20, something like this.
So he's an adult already. Okay.
And I want to describe the events that took place during our staying in Israel and Eli left in Egypt. First of all, 3 years after we left Egypt, there was a revolution in 1952. King Farouk was thrown away to Italy, and General Najib became the ruler of Egypt for a few months, I think. Then Gamal Abdel Nasser, took the power, and he became the president of Egypt. You see here King Farouk. Time magazine wrote about him and about Nasser. This is General Naguib, and I think Major Gamal Abdel Nasser. A few years later, Nasser signed an agreement with Britain that called all the British troops to be back out of Egypt. This is the Prime Minister at that time, Anthony Eden, the Prime Minister of Great Britain. And because of this declaration that the British will withdraw from the Suez Canal, not from the Suez Canal, but that they will withdraw and leave all the camps and the tanks and all the ammunition for the Egyptian. We decided in Israel, we decided to make a foolish operation against Egypt and to make some sabotage in British and American interests there. The reason was that the American would thought that the Muslim Brotherhood made those sabotage, and they will decide to remain in Egypt. That was a foolish and decision. And two of the friends of Eli, one was Shmuel Azar, who was his friends. They learned together in the Alexandria University. Shmuel Azar, he wrote in his curriculum vitae to the Mossad that he recruited to the Zionist movement Shmuel Azar. So he took it hardly that he was hanged with Dr. Moshe Marzouk, a Karaite Jew from Cairo. He was a doctor, a physician in Cairo. After that, in 1950, in July 1956, Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal. Why he did that? Because he asked for to get a loan for the economy of Egypt, and he wanted to build איך אומרים? סכר.
Say what? Say it in Hebrew. I'll tell you what it means.
He wanted to build a dome.
The dome.
In the south of Egypt, but they didn't want to finance this, so he went to the Soviet Union. They financed the dome, and for that, as a retaliation, he nationalized. He said that this is the Canal Suez is no more international way, but it's inside Egypt. The Egyptian build it and so on. So as a result of that, there was a treaty between three countries. Yes, the France, Great Britain, and the other power is Israel. They attacked together Egypt. Israel conquered the Suez, the peninsula of Sinai within 3 days. But the American involved, they were against this operation, and we had to return back Sinai, and the British and the French soldiers get out of Egypt. At the end of...
So Israel conquered the Sinai twice, Abraham? We conquered it twice and gave it back twice?
In 1967.
Yeah, 56 and 67, and twice we gave it back.
Yes, yes. At the end of 1956, Eli was detained along with thousands of foreign residents who were expelled from Egypt, and their property had been confiscated. Eli thought at the beginning that they detained him because of his secret operations in Egypt, but they thought that he was detained with thousands of people. Not they didn't know nothing about him. And after several, I think 2 months, he was detained on a ship, and then he was expelled to Italy, and he came from Italy and Greece to Israel. He arrived in 8th of February 1957, 8 years after we parted from him, and it's in the Hebrew calendar. It was Zayin Be'adar.
Wow, Moshe Rabbeinu.
It's the day of when Moses was passed away.
He was born and passed away on Zayin Adar.
Yes, that's the
So
same.
wait, you when you left Egypt, you were 3, and now it's 7 years. So you didn't see Eli from age 3 till 10, 11 years old. You didn't see him at all.
Yes, we reunited when I was 11 years old. You know,
Wow.
I separated from him when I was about 3 years old, and now I also didn't remember him. You know,
For
when
sure. You were a little baby when he left. Yeah, of course you recognize.
I only knew about him from the stories that my parents told me. Yes.
He was in communication with the family at all, with telephone calls or letters or anything. There was no communication.
Beginning, Morris used to send him through Italy to our relatives in Italy in a double envelope. You know, there was one
You
inside
mail a letter to from Italy, and then from Italy they would mail it back to Egypt. So you're going. Wow.
Alexandria, but one of the letters was captured by the Egyptian censorship, and Eli was inquired about it because they sent him a picture of Ezra in the army, and he said that as César in French, the name of Ezra, instead of Ezra, we said César joined the French army.
So they mailed the letter. They mailed a picture of your brother Ezra that was in the Israeli army to Italy, and then it went from Italy back to Egypt. And Egypt opened the mail, and they saw this picture, and they detained Eli.
Yes.
Wow.
For a short while, but they released him immediately. So we didn't know why he remained in Egypt while all his family was in Israel.
He had to tell your parents something. Why did he say he wanted to stay?
Yes, 10 years after his hanging, there was a memorial day for Eli, and Prime Minister at that time, Yitzhak Rabin, talked about Eli, and he said, and he revealed to the family why he remained in Egypt. It's in Hebrew, and then you can see the translation here.
אמש נערכה בבת ים עצרת זיכרון במלאת 10 שנים לעלייתו של אלי כהן על הגרדום בסוריה. ראש הממשלה יצחק רבין, שנטל חלק בטקס, עמד בדבריו גם על היבטים ידועים פחות בקורות חייו של אלי כהן.
אינני בא להוסיף על כל מה שנכתב עליו, אך אני יכול לומר כי סיפור גבורתו המלא והאמיתי טרם נכתב. נשאלת השאלה, מה עיכב את צאתו של אלי כהן ממצרים, כך שהוא הגיע למעשה עם הגל האחרון של העולים משם? התשובה היא אחת, אהבתו העזה של אלי כהן לעמו ולמולדתו. בגלל האהבה העזה זו, התנדב אלי להמשיך ולהתגורר במצרים, תחת צל הרדיפות של שנות ה-50, לפני ואחרי מבצע קדש.
He said, Eli volunteered to remain in Egypt under the shadow of persecution in the 1950s in order to save the Jews of Egypt and bring them back to Israel. So he was a secret agent there.
He was already in Egypt when he was already in his 20s in Egypt, and we're talking about in the 50s when there was so much problems with the Jews and the Arabs. Do we know how he was recruited at all? How it started? How'd they reach him? How'd they get to him? He was never in Israel, right? Before that.
No, he came secretly to Israel for some course of intelligence course, and then he sent back.
He was able to sneak into Israel, you say? Wow.
My Odette received a call phone. He said that he called her, but she came to his place in some hotel in Tel Aviv, but he didn't find him. Perhaps they didn't allow him to meet her. So, but we are not sure about this fact. Five days after his arrival to Israel, he was summoned to the Mossad. Not the Mossad, it was a unit that later linked to the Mossad. And he's written a resume and responded positively to the proposal to send for intelligence gathering in an Arab country. This is his handwriting, you see it. And it's written here in Hebrew that it was translated and given to several intelligence units, you know, but after page number 3 of his curriculum vitae was sent to a graphologic test.
To analyze the writing, they wanted to analyze his writing.
They wanted to. They knew him before, but they want to, you know, to see if he's loyal, not
Right.
you know, lying, and so many things you can see by you can recover by testing.
Analyzing his handwriting.
Yes. And it's written here in French. He said, I mastered the languages Arabic, French, English, Italian, and Hebrew fluently. I speak and understand Greek and Spanish. My knowledge of the Arabic language is perfect. I mastered the Egyptian dialect, Syrian dialect, and Lebanese dialect.
Wow. So that's a lot of languages to be able to master and to speak. Even for people that speak Arabic, they understand that there's a big difference between the different dialects. I mean, there's pronunciation differences. To try to act as one type of an Arab to someone else is not so easy to do. So he's saying he's mastering the Egyptian dialect and the Syrian dialect and the Lebanese dialect. They're not similar. They all speak Arabic, obviously, but the accents that are said and some of the letters are even pronounced differently.
My parents has the Halabic or Syrian.
Right, pronunciation. Right, but they lived in Egypt, so they had to speak Egyptian Arabic also.
Yes, so he knew because he was a talent, and they listened to my parents.
And where did he learn Greek? Greek. I mean, I understand French. They spoke in Egypt at the time. I could get that. Italian is very similar, but Greek is. Where did you get that from?
Alexandria was a very cosmopolitan, city. Well, all over from people that living there from all over the world: Italian, Greeks, British, German, even. My mother learned with a German teacher, at school.
So obviously that's a nice qualification for someone who wants to be a spy, obviously, to speak all those kind of languages professionally. Okay.
But when he wrote his curriculum vitae, he also mentioned that he belongs to the unit that he was involved in the Lavon affair, in 1956, on the sabotage, but he was not making sabotage. He was arrested for 2 days only. They took him to the neighborhood where the apartment was written on his name, the apartment of the underground, Israeli underground movement in Alexandria. So because of that, he was detained. But he said the inquirer asked him, "Do you know Marcel Nino?" He said no. And they told him, "But how she know you?" He said, "I was a manager of a big store there. So everyone can know me, but I cannot know thousands of people," he said to them. So they released him after 2 days of inquiries.
So they disqualified him from the Mossad, really not the precursor to the Mossad, because they were worried that the Arab governments might recognize him because they knew him. They arrested him prior.
Intelligence unit, yes, they didn't know if his picture are in their files there or
in
not.
Files. Mm.
So they said they decided to wait a while, and at that time there was no computers, you know. So they believed that after a few years they will not.
They'll not recognize them anymore. The picture will get lost or whatever. If they had a picture of something.
So he get a job first of all in the intelligence unit for translating newspapers from Arabic to Hebrew, and also from broadcasting of radio programs in Arab countries. He translated it to Hebrew, but after a while he resigned and worked as an auditor or economist in a big store in Tel Aviv. It's called Hamashbir Merkazi. And
Famous.
a few months before his wedding, a representative of the intelligence unit came to him, and they make him to be fired from his job in Hamashbir Merkazi.
The government did that. They wanted him to come work for them, so they made him.
Yes. They want to make press on him, that he
Pressure. They will put pressure on him to come work for them.
decision, you know. So they came to him and to his work, and said to him, why you don't want to join us? Come back to us. We are waiting to you. And if you're not like it, you can resign when you want. That they said to him. And it's written here. They decided that he will think about it and will write to them if his answer is positive. So this is his handwriting in Hebrew. He wrote to Mr. Shlomo Millet that he was responsible for his recruitment. That according to their letter, he is giving them a positive answer and wanted to know in what hour to meet them and where.
So at this time, he's living in Israel, and the family is connected again, right? And you're familiar that this is what he's thinking. That's the one he wants to join the Mossad. Nobody knows what's going on.
No one. The family didn't know anything about it. No,
nothing. So he's just going along, and everything is nice. Family life is good. They think he's going to work in the Mashbir, and he's really joining the Mossad. Is that what's going on?
Yes, that's correct. So why they didn't recruit him when he came to Israel, and what happened now? The real reason was that Syria and Egypt became United Arab Republic. You know, Nasser signed an agreement with the Prime Minister of Syria, and from now it's called the UAR, United Arab Republic. It was not a federation, you know. It was the Grand Egypt. Nasser was the ruler of the Syria and Egypt, yes. And Eli went to 6 months course of training, you know, for sharpening his memory, for tracking and avoiding exposing photography.
He's married at this time, right? So he has any children yet when this is going on? When he's
at that time, even his wife was pregnant, and when at the middle of his training, his boss came to him and said, "Go home.
Your wife.
Gave birth." And he said, "No,
He didn't.
I finished this task, and then he said, no, I oblige you to go now. Go home."
So his wife thinks that he's going to work, but every day he's going to Mossad to be trained. That's what's going on.
Yes, that's.
Wow.
But he came at night to home.
He's coming home every night, right? He's in Israel, being trained in Israel.
Yes.
Right.
So in February '61, he was sent to Argentina for 8 months to be there. He was presented as a rich Syrian, and quickly he became involved in the high society of Buenos Aires.
So he was sent there. He was sent there with the intention to end up in Syria. That was the beginning of the plan. Why Argentina? I'm saying
because there was a lot of Syrian that immigrated from Syria like my father and mother left Egypt on the beginning of the 20th century, lot of Syrian, it was then the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman Empire collapsed economically at that time. Many of people left the Ottoman Empire. Some of them went to South America. Some came to Egypt and other places. Some went to New York or every place, Arab and Jews together.
So that was the plan. The plan was to we trained him to be a spy for Syria, and we're going to send him to Argentina to be inserted into the Syrian people. Is that what happened?
Syrian community there. Yes, right. There are a lot of Syrian there. A lot of Arabs, not only Syrian. Among his acquaintances were the editor of Arab bilingual newspaper called Abdel Latif al-Khashan, and he was an auditor of magazine written in dual language, languages, Arab and Spanish together. And Eli wrote, articles on this newspaper, on news magazine, and he suggested that he will be his partner in South America in this magazine.
The editor asked Eli to be his partner, or Eli asked the editor?
The editor, he was the owner, not only the editor, he was also the owner of this.
Owner of the newspaper.
He asked him to be his partner in this magazine. I think the Mossad financed it, and he became, a good friend of him.
Mm-hmm.
And he also introduced him to the military attaché of Syria in Buenos Aires, called Amin al-Hafiz at that time.
That's Amin al-Hafiz that's later going to become the president of Syria. That's so Eli met him in Argentina when he was still not yet big in the government.
Yes. On September 61, a military coup took place that came to an end. The separation. It's brought.
Right, so that's Egypt and Syria split up over here.
Syria from the United Arab Republic, and it became an independent state. But the Egyptians didn't agree to that coup, and Egypt sent a battalion of parachutists who tried to
invade, conquer,
to be united again, but it didn't succeed. They all were captured in Latakia harbor, and Syria called Syria again. But Egypt, until the Six-Day War, and after the Six-Day War, still called herself the UAR. United. They didn't call herself Egypt, but United Arab Republic. You see this picture. It was taken in September 1961. You see Eli here in the right side of the picture. It's written Eli, and Amin al-Hafiz. He made a party for the separation of the from Egypt, from blocking the unity between Egypt and. I showed this picture in Tel Aviv for officers in the IDF, and I received this note in Hebrew when I was speaking. I opened this note, and it was written there. I was the military attaché in Argentina at that time. I and my wife were in this party. I didn't recognize Eli at that time. I thought he was a Syrian. He came from Amin al-Hafiz. So, but if you want more picture about this event, I will search in my albums and I sent it to you. When he finished his task in Buenos Aires, he came to Israel for about a week or something. And my father passed away, and immediately after the Shiva, he left Israel, and he was in his way to Damascus. He came he flight to Germany, to Munich, and from Munich, he took a train to Italy. From Genoa, he took a ship to Lebanon and Syria. But the ship went through Alexandria, from Italy to Alexandria, from Alexandria to Beirut.
So this is how they're going to move him now from Buenos Aires back to Egypt, so to insert him into Syria now. This is his first time to get there.
Yes, when they arrived at Alexandria, he didn't want to get out of the ship because the ship will continue after a few hours to Beirut, because they knew him perhaps in Alexandria. So he didn't want to but in his trail, the judge asked Sheikh al-Arab, the person who make it easier to him to enter Damascus, why you insisted that he will get out of the ship and visit the harbor of Alexandria? He said, I didn't know that he is that he is a Jew or Israeli. I thought his name was Kamel Amin Tabet. And I thought that he is someone who was exiled, a Syrian, that he now is returning to his homeland. I wanted to. So the judge asked Sheikh al-Arab, why you yourself stayed on the ship and didn't get out, but you sent him to what? Are you his instructor? His teacher? Why you stayed on the ship? He said, you have to remember, it was after the separation between Egypt and Syria. There was bad feelings against the Syrian. I am a Syrian, I have a Syrian passport. I didn't want to go there because, but Eli was Argentinian. I said to him, you are Argentinian, go, and when you come back, bring me a mango juice.
So this Syrian person that you're talking about, this Sheikh al-Arab, he knew that Eli was Jewish? Was he lying that he didn't know, or he was telling the truth? He didn't really know.
He knew that he is a Jew, but he, Mashech al-Ard worked, he was on during the World War II in Germany, in Nazi Germany. And for make living, he started to smuggle the Jews from Europe to shelter, you know, at that time in France and so on. But the German, at the end, knew about that and tried to
capture him.
To capture him. But the American helped him to get out of Europe, and they recruited him to be a spy in intelligence team in South Korea and many places.
So he didn't know that Eli was really a Jew that's going to be a spy. He didn't know.
Israel recruited him. Perhaps then, you know, the agents works for everyone for money. They don't care for.
So the Israelis recruited him to help them get Eli into Syria. That's what happened.
They gave him a new car, very advanced car at that time.
That's how they bribed him. They gave him a car.
Yes, yes. And the two were on this ship. It's called Hesperia, from Genoa to Alexandria, and from Alexandria to Beirut. This is the Mashech al-Ard I told you before.
Mm-hmm.
And when they arrived to Beirut, Mashech al-Ard called his friend who was in Syrian intelligence, you know, and asked him to help him to get the car without checking, you know, from
the customs. They want to get the car through customs.
Yes, they came from Beirut to the border between Lebanon by the car, by his car.
So they're going to drive. They're going to drive from Lebanon into Syria.
Yes, this is the
border crossing. The border crossing.
Yes, it's called the Abu.
Now, I'm assuming that the car has things that are hidden. What's going on in the car? What does Eli have in the car with him?
You know, the person from the Mossad or of the intelligence unit at that time put all the equipment inside the doors of the car.
So the Mossad gave him a gift as a car, but inside the car they hid the equipment for the communication for Eli.
I don't know if he knew or not, but it was revealed in the trail of Eli that they came together with the officer of the intelligence officer came there. He was a friend of Mashech al-Ard. He was called the Nasruddin Wanli. He released the car from custom inspection. When one came of the inspector came to check the car, he gave him. He said to him, "I already checked it. Go away. Go away. They are in a hurry." So they went together with the car to his. He was a very rich man, Mashech al-Ard. He had a villa on the suburb of Damascus, and he left the car there, but all the equipment was there, and he tried to, and he took Eli to an hotel in Damascus, and he went back to his villa on the suburbs of. But in the evening, he made a party for Eli, and invited many persons. Among them was the ambassador of Jordan, the ambassador of Belgium, and many people. And he introduced Eli as one of the richest persons in South America. They are going to spend and to invest money, big money in Syria to help the Syrian economy. And everyone wanted to be a friend of Kamel Amin Tabet, that the Syrian name of Eli. He received, documents to stay in Syria. This was his visit card. It's written Kamel Amin Sabit, Damascus, Said Remih, Madkhal Madrasa.
That's where his office was or whatever. He had an office business card.
This is the address of his home. It's written that his home was near the palace of the president, Qasr Diafa in Arabic. This is the neighborhood of where he was living. Today is not today, but today perhaps it's ruined now because of the war there. But he chose an apartment on the 4th floor. From his balcony, he could see the headquarters of the Syrian army. A few days after his arrival, I forgot to say that, to mention that when Eli came to left Argentina, he took with him letters of recommendation to many important persons in Damascus. Among them was Joseph, the director of the Spanish broadcast on Radio Damascus. And he invited him to an interview.
An interview on the radio.
Yes, you can hear here. It's in Arabic, but I will not give you the whole because not everyone understands Arabic. But there is a translation here. Only to hear the voices.
I want to hear the voice of Eli, right? Let's hear Eli's voice.
مع المعترض كامل أمين صادق ضيعت سلاحنا على الأرصاد نعلم بيننا اليوم في دمشق الأخ كامل أمين ثابت المغترب الشاب الذي هاجر من بلاده يافعا وعاد إليها رجلا يملأ قلبه حب الأرض التي ابتسم فيها لأول دفقة نور. عاد إليها ليعيش بين ظهرانيها في ظلال الحرية والعزة القومية. عاد إلى دمشق مدينة العز وقلب العروبة. أهلا وسهلا أخي. ممكن إعطائنا لمحة خاصة عن وضعكم في الأساتذة؟
That's Eli's voice, right?
Yes. Yes.
This is Eli's voice. Yes.
The interviewer said, "Today we are in Damascus with the brother Kamel Amin Thabit, who lives abroad, a young man who had immigrated from his country like a boy and returned to her as a man. His heart is full of love of the land, where he smiled for the first time, a smile of light. He returned to her to live among her flowers in the shadow of freedom and national pride. He returned to Damascus, the city of glory and the heart of Arabness."
Okay, Abraham,
yes.
Let's fast forward a little bit to the parts of where he infiltrated into the government. Okay. Let's get to some of how far Eli had got in.
In a short time, he already came acquaintance to many people that helped him without knowing whom they are helping. Among them was from Joseph, he recognized Maza Zahar ad-Din, the nephew of Abdul Karim Zahar ad-Din, the chief of staff of the Syrian army at that time. Then he took him to the Golan Heights, and he knew the commander of the Golan Heights, Ziad al-Khariri, and he knew Mustafa Tlas, the head of the
Air Force.
Yes, of the Syrian Air Force, and even his judges was before he was captured was his friends Salah ad-Dali, Salim Khattoum. Salim Khattoum was the commander of the commando in Syria, and he was one of his judges. George Sefat, I told you
After he was captured, you said the people that he was friends with turned out to be the judges that sentenced him to death.
Amin al-Hafez, he knew him in Argentina, and he became president of Syria, and he was the best friends. You see here one of his first cables came from Syria to Israel. There was a retaliation against Syria made by Israeli troops. There was many casualties that 8 soldiers were killed at that time, and one of them disappeared. They didn't know nothing about him. His name was Yaakov Dvir. And Eli went to the Golan Heights and started to ask questions. Didn't you get some
Israeli soldier
captured any Israeli soldiers and so on? And he get to the Golan Heights together with the nephew of the chief of staff. So everyone opened all the doors there. And he wrote the normal situation, all camps, no movement to the south. Our tanks are abandoned. This morning, 4 MiGs circled Damascus several times. It was written on 31 of March 16.
How often was he transmitting messages back to Israel? Is this daily? Is it weekly?
What?
How often was he sending messages back to Israel?
Almost every day he sent them messages, sometimes several messages a day. That's one of the reasons
he was captured.
Yes.
He's transmitting messages, looks like in French. Is that what it is?
Yes, because this is in Arabic. It was not allowed to write the messages because in Arabic there are many letters that return too many times. So
they can make a mistake.
No, not to make a mistake. It's easier to decode it.
To decode it. I got you. Okay.
Latin letters, it's better.
Right. Repetitious letters, right? Okay.
To decode and decode. Decode. Morris, while the time Eli was in Syria, also recruited to another unit in the intelligence.
So wait, time out 1 minute. You yourself and your brother Eli and Maurice all worked for the Israeli intelligence?
Not at the same time.
Not at the same time, but they came back to the same family multiple times to recruit. You think there's a reason for that?
You have to ask them, not me.
I don't know. Are they looking just specifically for Arab-speaking Jews at the time? Are they looking for?
I was almost born here. I was 3 years when I came to Israel. Yes, but I learned Arabic by myself. I'm autodidact. My wife learned Hebrew language in the Bar Ilan University. So she learned also Arabic. So I learned the letters from her, but I knew Arabic to speak, and so I learned by myself now I mastered Arabic. I even translated the book of the head of the judges in Syria. He wrote a book about Eli, so I translated to Hebrew. But Maurice was in that unit, and his task was to
decode
yes, to decode the messages that came in Morse code. And one day he received this is the real copy of one of the messages he received from Eli. He didn't know that he is communicated with Eli. Every agent has a code. Eli had the code 566, and it's written in French here. Thanks for so much for the sewing machine. Did you receive my letter to Nadia from last month? Send my congratulations to Irit for their first birthday, which will apply tomorrow. It was written on 5th of September 1963. Maurice saw that it was written Nadia here, Irit, and he decided to go to visit his sister-in-law in Bat Yam, in the apartment of Eli Cohen in Bat Yam, and he saw a new sewing machine. And Nadia said proudly, Eli sent it to me for my birthday. From that moment, he knew that he is communicating with his own brother.
Wow.
But
so he's been receiving messages for a while already. He doesn't even know that it was Eli, and now he's finding out that his brother is a spy in Syria.
And he could go back to the cables that came a year ago. Yes, he will go to the file and find all the cables of 566.
This is the first time that someone from the family is finding out that Eli's a spy.
The family didn't know that at that moment. Only Maurice. He didn't.
He didn't tell anybody. He didn't tell Nadia. He didn't tell your parents.
That moment, no.
Wow.
Here you see Eli with the very close circle for all the government and the ministers and so on. Here Eli with the Prime Minister Samir Jundi. Later will be the ambassador of Syria in France. And he with the head of the court, Salah Dali. In some restaurant in Damascus, and you know, here it looks like it was in Purim, I think. You see Eli
wearing a mask. Yeah, he's wearing a funny nose. Yeah.
Yes. And here you see Eli with in the entourage of the president Amin al-Hafez. At the entrance of the...
He's walking right next to him. He's walking right next to him.
Near him is Nur ad-Din al-Atasi, the deputy of the president, Amin al-Hafez, the president, and the head of the parliament, and all the, you know, he was with the very most very important people in Syria. And when he was asked on his trail how he entered the Golan Heights, because it was forbidden even for the Syrian to visit the Golan Heights. Only soldiers that served there were allowed to enter the Golan Heights. And he didn't say the truth in his court. He said that Nasruddin Wanli, the person from the officer that helped Mat Sheikh al-Arab to enter Syria, he said, I gave him 800 lira, Syrian lira.
A bribe to let me in.
And he gave me permission to enter the Golan Heights for you know, bathing and swimming there in the hot bathing there in the Golan Heights. But a few years ago, we received from the Mossad the original permission to enter the Golan Heights. It was signed by the Chief of Staff Abdel Karim Zahreddin. Here is the translation to English for the Arabic document.
So they gave him he actually had a permission to enter from the commander of the army of Egypt permission to enter the Golan Heights.
It's written Syrian Arab Republic, the general headquarters of the army and the armed forces, intelligence department, security, numbered so and so, date 17 of October 1962, confirmation to passage to Al-Hama only, Al-Hama. Name and number of people traveling, only one, Mr. Kamel Amin Thabet, nationality Argentinian, Syrian origin. The reason, bathing.
He's going for vacation.
Date of departure and return in digits, departure on 19 of October 62 and return on 30 of October 62. A long bathing, you see.
11 days, yeah.
This certificate is valid for several trips. And so on, the holder of this authorization must contact the intelligence branch in Al-Quneitra. Upon arrival there, this authorization must be returned after use of to the headquarters of the army and the armed forces intelligence department, signed General Abdul Karim Zahreddin, commander of the army and the army. When he came to the Golan Heights with a permission signed by the chief of staff, General Abdul Karim Zahreddin, he also, participate on maneuvers of tanks and several armored maneuvers, and they explained to him not what exists, but what they are planning to do.
Abraham, we're starting to unfortunately get a little bit tight for time. We want to have some time to do some questions. I think we should fast forward. Let's fast forward to the point where he starts to get captured. Let's talk about how he was captured. Tell me what happened, the different stories behind that, and the trial. So let's move. Let's fast forward a little bit.
You can see here also Eli with Adnan al-Jabi, a MiG-21 pilot, which was the most advanced jet on the world at that time. I will just go to the end, but before I wanted to see to show you what he answered to the question of the head of the court at that time. He asked him to which ministries and institutions you were able to penetrate, and he said Ministry of Information, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Municipal Affairs, the Central Bank. I visited Al-Hama twice, and I was present in armored maneuvers. I visited Zabadani and Baludan. Rifai from the Ministry of Economy. I knew Lieutenant Zahreddin, the nephew of the former chief of the staff. Lieutenant Colonel Khalil Safur took me to the harbor of Latakia. I made friends with Michel Sass, one of the chief engineers involved in diverting the Jordan River sources.
So he was really he was given green card, open doors, go anywhere you want, and deep infiltration. Yeah. So how was he captured?
He went also to Aleppo, to Latakia, to everywhere in Syria. Now I go to the end of the story, how he was captured. There was several versions why he was captured. The Egyptian version was that they was a delegation of the staff, of the staff of the commanders of the Egyptian army came to visit the Golan Heights, and they took pictures together, the Syrian commanders and the Egyptian commanders, and the only civilian on that pictures on the Golan Heights was Kamel Amin Thabet, the leader of the Baath party in Damascus, or so on. But this picture went revealed by one of the Egyptian officers, and they said, "This is not Kamel Amin Thabet. This is Eli Cohen. we learned together in the Alexandria University.
Oh, wow. So an Egyptian person recognized him.
But this is the Egyptian version. The Syrian denied this version, the why he was captured. There was also two Syrian version. One of the president that he said that he was broadcasting too much and too long telegrams to Israel. So the Indian embassy, Eli was a neighbor of the Indian embassy in Damascus, and they interrupted their broadcasting to New Delhi. So they complained to the authorities in Damascus, and they received new equipment from the Soviet Union, and they discovered that Eli broadcasting, and they said they captured him red-handed broadcasting to Israel. But this is not the version of the head of the intelligence who captured Eli. I think this is the real reason why he was captured. An interview in Lebanese magazine Al-Asbu' Al-Arabi with Ahmed Suidani, the head of the Syrian intelligence, shows that two people, Farhan al-Atasi and his relative Mu'in al-Hakimi, an officer in the Syrian Navy, were suspected of spying for the United States, and in an attempt to smuggle a Soviet missile to Cyprus from a surveillance after them that lasted 6 months, it turned out that they used to visit the house of Kamel Amin Tabet. At first, the followers did not attach importance to it, and Kamel, Eli Cohen, allowed to leave Syria, and he arrived in Israel. During Eli's stay in Israel, the two were arrested and interrogated. They admitted their relationship with Kamel. When Eli returned to Syria from his last visit to Israel at the end of November 1964, he was placed under secret surveillance. On January 18th at the 8 a.m., Syrian secret intelligence officers broke into his apartment and found him listening to a Morse message from Israel in his Sony portable radio. After a thorough search, they found his secret transmitter, and he was arrested.
So he was able to come back and forth a little bit, Abraham, between Egypt and Syria and Israel while he was actually posing as a Syrian. He had come back to Israel a few times?
He came to Israel every 6 months, about 6 months. Usually on Pesach and on Rosh Hashanah, he came to Israel for a week, 2 weeks, and he returned to Syria. But so he already came to Israel before he was captured, and he was very, very angry and nervous. And he knew something about this.
He suspected that they thought he was doing something, that he wasn't who he was.
He knew that the people that spy for the American were under survival, and he's
surveillance.
The Mossad about it, and they told him, "Don't worry, go back." Those are the two who are spying for the United States. Major Abdel Mu'in al-Hakimi and Farhan al-Atasi, 36 years old. This is from American newspaper. One of ours hanged a spy in Syria, and this is the second secretary in the American embassy in Damascus was expelled from Syria. His name was Walter Snowden. He was the man who was in charge of them. He wanted them to smuggle the new missile that the Syrian Navy received and to smuggle it to Cyprus.
How long was Eli in capture before they sentenced him to death?
He was in the jail about 101 days exactly.
And the family found out about this, how that he was captured? How did the family find out?
When he was captured, immediately when the family, Maurice knew, and he told the whole family. I was at the army at that time, and I didn't know, but I saw.
This is the first time that Maurice told the family that he was a spy, or he had already told them before that?
He told the spy before that, a month before. Before he came to Israel, on October 64, he received a sign of the distress from Eli. There was a letter that Eli was not allowed to write it, even if he make a mistake. Like if he wants,
it's a secret code. Secret code that I'm in trouble.
Secret code. There is a letter like the why. That's for example. Not the right, but for example, if he want, one day I will be in Tel Aviv. He should not write day with why. Even he made a mistake, he will put a day instead of it something. But when he put this letter, not allowed that letter, even in the opening of the cable and in the middle of the cable, 3 places on the cable, so then the receiver knew that Eli is in danger at that time. And Maurice received this cable, and he was very angry and started to cry on his unit, and he told the family.
So when Eli came back to Israel the last time, they already knew that he was a spy? And they let him go back to Egypt, to Syria anyway?
The family knew at that time. I didn't believe Maurice at that time because he came to Israel, because he told us that Eli is in danger before he came to Israel, because he received cable.
Right.
So when he came, I thought Maurice this is from his imagination. He joined the army when he was very old. No, not as a young man. He's like me in the army. Yes, I thought he started to imagine, but now.
So Eli comes back to Israel. The family knows that he's a spy, and nobody. What happens? He doesn't. Nadia lets him go back. He does this conversation with his wife.
Yes, everyone told him not to go back, and so I didn't. I wasn't that. I was.
Did he deny to the family that he was a spy, or he admitted it openly? That's, I'm a spy, and I have to go back.
But he said
I'm safe. I'm safe.
More than you here in Israel, he said.
Wow.
But he was obliged to go. He couldn't refuse to go. This is the head of the Syrian intelligence, Salah Ahmad Soidani, and this is the Salah Jadid, the chief of staff, the new chief of staff of Syria at that time.
So these are the ones that captured Eli.
And
the trial.
Yes, the trial. This is Eli, you see here and this is Matshekh al-Ard. He was also sentenced. He sentenced to 10 years with hard works in the jail, but he met suicide. This is George Saif, the person who invited him to the interview on the radio, and this is the nephew of the chief of staff, Maza Zahreddin. This is the manager of the
airport
of Damascus. All of them were friends. This is the
Now, while Eli's being captured now and he's on trial, he was in communication with the family. Was he in communication with Israel? Did anyone speak to him at all?
no,
Was he
no,
allowed to speak to anybody?
possible. No, no. The family, my brother Ephraim and Nadia went to Paris to try to meet Samuel Jundi, who was the ambassador of Syria in Paris. He refused to meet them,
To meet
and
them.
they didn't allow the attorney Jacques Mercier and Paul Arrigui, two famous.
Access. They didn't let it. Wouldn't let the attorneys even see Eli. Nobody saw Eli. Nobody.
Now I translated the book of the head of the judges in Syria to Hebrew, and I revealed that the president and the prime minister of Syria allowed the judges to represent Eli in the court, but he convinced them not to allow them to, because he said it's against the law, because there were before the two spies spying for America, they also didn't receive the
Representation.
to get attorneys or anyone to defend them. So he said he is our enemy, and according to the army law, it's not allowed to get some defense.
Okay. This letter that you're showing me now, that was the letter that he wrote to his family. What is this?
This is, yes, this is the two letters in French and in Arabic. This is the translation of the letters. Dear, my dear wife Nadia and my dear parent, I am writing to you these last words a few minutes before my end, and I would like to beg you to be in a good relationship forever. I request you, dear Nadia, to pardon me and take care of yourself and our children. Look after them thoroughly, bring them up and give them a complete education. Don't deprive them or yourself of anything. Please be always in close communication with my dear parent. You can get remarried in order not to deprive the children of a father. You have the full liberty to do so. I am begging you, my dear Nadia, not to spend your time in weeping about something already past. Concentrate on yourself, looking forward for a better future. I'm sending my last kisses to you and to the children, Sophie, Irit, and Shaul, also to all my family, especially to my mother, my sister Odette and her family, Maurice and his family, Ezra and his family, Sarah and her family, Zion and his family, Alfred, Ephraim and his family, and the end to Bero, Abraham. Don't forget also your dear family. Give them my best regards. Don't forget to pray for the soul of my late father and of mine. Receive all of you my last kisses and blessing. Eli Cohen, 18 of May, 1965.
That was the day that he was hung.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
18, he was executed.
I think we have to move on to the questions. We have just a little bit of time left, Abraham.
Okay.
Let's move on to some of the questions that we've been receiving both before the event and during the event. People have been sending in questions. I'm going to ask a couple of them to you if you don't mind.
Okay.
First question is coming in from multiple people. Morris Silvers, Adina Batesman have similar questions. They're asking about, we know that many things were written about Eli, and there were movies and books and all kinds of history. And they want to know about the accuracy of, as far as what you think was it portrayed accurately, or the things that are made up. What's your feelings about all that's been written about Eli?
The film that was in Netflix is totally inaccurate. Even they didn't know didn't make any research before, you know. Even they said he was born in 1915. My father was 10 years old when they said he was born. And all bullshit there, you know. I said that it was a combination between Tarzan, Borat, and James Bond. It's good
So
for
so the one from Netflix you think is totally inaccurate, and the books, I mean, the books are a little bit more accurate.
In the Israeli TV, they made very close to reality 3 chapters.
Like a documentary.
Documentary, yes. They stay with me about 2 years to do this.
Oh wow. So then that's a follow-up question I'm getting from Ezra Han and Abi Mala. They want to know where you got all this information. How'd you get the pictures? How'd you get the cables? I'm assuming all this stuff is classified. How is it that you're able to present this, and where'd you get it from?
Some of them, the documents I received from the Mossad. Yes, the broadcasting from the radio Damascus, you know, the interview, I received it a few years ago from the Mossad. And some of the cables I get from the unit where Morris were working there. His friends gave it to me without, he made the private archive in his home.
So you're not supposed to have it, basically, is what you're saying. Wow. I'm getting also a bunch of questions from people asking about the family life. How is it that Nadia was okay with seeing her husband, you know, 1 week every 6 months? How is that? Obviously, the children were very young. He had he has 3 children from what I saw in the letter that he mentioned by name.
Yes.
And how old were the children when this was going on?
The eldest, Sophie, was about 55 years old, and the youngest, the boy, was about several months, about 9 months, I think.
Wow. So they really barely know their father. The children hardly know. The oldest was 5 years old when he was young.
Only Sophie, perhaps the eldest, she has a very weak memory about him, you know, but she didn't remember.
And the children, where are they now? What do the children do now? They're all, I'm assuming, in Israel?
Yes, all of them are in Israel. Sophie, the eldest, she has a psychologist. She has his own clinics in Tel Aviv.
And what's this picture you're showing me over here? It looks like some kind of memorial to Eli. What is this?
Yes, this is on the Mossad. Yes, this is the school of warriors or spies. It's called on the name of Eli.
The name, the Spy Academy after Eli. That's the name of the school.
And also, they put a sculpture of Eli in the entrance of this academy, and it's written that Eli provided the state of Israel with vital information that contributed to its victory in the 6-day war.
So I know that the family for years has been trying to get to the remains of Eli back. Do we know anything about the remains? What's the status of that?
I don't know if there is a remain, because one of his neighbors in Syria wrote me a letter a few years ago, and he said that his body was given to medicine
research. They donated his body. The Syrians gave his body to medical research.
Yes.
Wow.
I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what he wrote. And they said now that they do not know where he was buried, because there was two attempts to smuggle his corpse to Israel. First, one year, less than 1 year after his death, there was an attempt to smuggle the corpse, and in the border between Lebanon and Syria, a shepherd, his dog was barking at the middle of the night, and he get out and they saw the people who were with the corpse run away and left the corpse on the field. He announced to the authorities, and they came and they revealed that this is the corpse of Eli Cohen, and they built and they buried him in another place. And it was twice that there was an attempt to smuggle so they said that now they do not know where he was buried.
Wow. So it looks like from Eli, even when he was even a young man, all the way back in Egypt, he was always apparently involved in the intelligence field, always working for Am Yisrael. Do you think he would have ever stopped if he hadn't been captured, or he was gonna work as a spy until he got caught?
I cannot answer this question. I believe that he will be with his family, and he was he loved very much his kids and his wife. I remember when Sophie was crying, as a baby, he used to enter his bed, bed of baby, and right. She, instead of crying, she started to laugh because he made himself like a baby, he put the
pacifier.
Pacifier.
Pacifier. Motzitz is pacifier.
Pacifier, yes.
And yeah. So let me ask one more question. It looks like we maybe have time for one more, and that's about it. I have a few people asking about the Mossad and how they took care of the family going after this when Eli was killed. Did they take care of the wife, the children, the brothers, the mother, the parents? What was the involvement of the government as far as the family? I mean, Eli was obviously, at the time when he was killed, we didn't have the ramifications of how much benefit he did to Am Yisrael, but later on, after 67, and we saw what the tremendous amount of information that we had. So really, through Hakarat HaTov, I want to understand, what did the government do for the family?
They acted according to the law. A widow officer or an agent, it's the same. They received the salary of Eli. When he was in service, he was a major, and he became lieutenant colonel after his death. So the salary was a little bit higher than of a lieutenant colonel. That's what she received.
So she received a pension basically for Eli's. And then the rest of the family, anything, the mother, the parents, the brothers, nothing.
No, nothing. That's the law in Israel. Give only to
the direct family, the parents.
And after 1 month of mourning, I went back to the army to serve.
Did you receive special treatment at all in the army because you were the brother of Eli Cohen?
No one. At that time, no one talked about Eli. Nothing. Only a few years later, they started all the newspapers and all the streets.
After the 67 war, that's when they started to realize what it was. I got you.
Okay. The war, yes.
Okay, Abraham, we've reached the end of our time. I want to thank you so much. I think this was a very, very informative event. I know that we had many people online enjoying it. We want to thank you. We want to thank your family for the sacrifice that you've given to Am Yisrael and to protect Am Yisrael. So thank you very much for that. And we wish you all the best to you and the family. Be'ezrat Hashem, only good things.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abraham. I want to wish everybody, this is the end of our event. We thank you all for attending. There will be a recording of the event. It will be placed on YouTube, on the SCA and the SCC channel on YouTube. You'll be able to watch the recording probably sometime tomorrow. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Hatzlacha to everybody.